Right now, there is a number on your thermostat. You probably set it without thinking. Maybe 68, maybe 72. You turn a dial or tap a screen, and within minutes, the air around you adjusts to within a degree of whatever you decided. Too warm? You press a button. Too cold? You press another. The temperature of the space you live in is, for the first time in human history, almost entirely under your control. That is an extraordinary thing. And like most extraordinary things, we stopped noticing it almost immediately. Because here's what the historical record makes clear. For the overwhelming majority of human existence, cold wasn't an inconvenience. It was an adversary, a serious, ever-present, potentially lethal one. And the lengths humans went to in order to survive it, the ingenuity, the social arrangements, the surprising intimacy of it, tell a story about what we quietly gave up when we stopped having to fight it. Let's start with what cold actually does to a human body, because the stakes matter. When your core body temperature drops below about 35 degrees Celsius, your body begins to shut down non-essential functions to protect the organs. Shivering starts, your muscles contracting rapidly to generate heat. Thinking becomes sluggish. Fine motor control deteriorates. Below 32 degrees, shivering stops, which feels deceptively like relief, but is actually the body giving up. Below 28 degrees, cardiac arrest becomes likely. This is hypothermia, and it doesn't require a blizzard. A damp, drafty house in a wet autumn. A night on a stone floor. A long journey in the rain. These were the ordinary conditions of ordinary human life for most of history. And in a world without central heating, the margin between comfortable and dangerous was far thinner than most of us alive today can intuitively grasp. The solutions humans developed to close that margin are some of the most creative and some of the most socially intimate in all of history. The oldest answer was the simplest: fire. Controlled fire appears in the archaeological record at least 400,000 years ago, possibly earlier. And for the vast majority of human history, it was the only answer. A hearth in the center of a shelter, burning continuously, fed through the night by whoever was awake. In many cultures, the fire was never allowed to go out. Not because of ceremony, though ceremony often developed around it. Because relighting it was genuinely difficult, time-consuming, and sometimes dangerous. A fire that survived was a resource worth protecting. What structured life around the hearth was not just warmth, but social proximity. In a world with one heat source, everyone gathered around it. This was not optional. You could not take your warmth and go to another room. You ate together, slept together, argued together, raised children together, all within reach of the same fire because that's where survival was. The hearth was the social architecture of early human life. The word focus in Latin literally means hearth. The center of the house was the center of attention, was the center of heat. All three meanings collapsed into one. As human settlements grew, fire became more elaborate, but also more dangerous. In ancient Rome, the wealthy had hypocausts, sophisticated underfloor heating systems where hot air from a furnace circulated beneath raised tile floors and through hollow walls. Wealthier Roman homes could maintain relatively stable indoor temperatures throughout the winter months. It was, in its way, a precursor to the radiator systems that wouldn't appear again for nearly 1,800 years. But the vast majority of Romans weren't wealthy. Most city dwellers lived in multi-story apartment buildings called insulae, made largely of wood, heated by portable bronze braziers, essentially metal bowls filled with burning charcoal. The charcoal produced heat and also carbon monoxide. Entire city blocks burned regularly. The joke among Romans was that the only real way to get rich in Rome was to be a fire brigade owner, because they would arrive, negotiate a price with the owner while the building burned, and only then begin putting it out. Heat, in ancient Rome, was simultaneously a luxury and a threat. In medieval Europe, the dominant heating technology was the open hearth in the center of a hall, a design that generated enormous amounts of smoke along with the heat, sending it up through a hole in the roof. This worked, roughly, but it meant that medieval interior air quality was, by modern standards, appalling. Soot settled on everything. Eyes watered constantly. Respiratory illness was endemic and often attributed to other causes, because the idea that indoor air could itself be the problem simply hadn't developed yet. The chimney changed everything. The chimney, a dedicated vertical shaft to carry smoke out of a building, sounds simple. But it took until approximately the 12th century for chimneys to become standard in European architecture. Before that, most smoke just went where it wanted. The chimney moved the fire to the side wall, freed the center of the room from smoke, and allowed upper floors to be heated separately. It enabled the private bedroom, which had previously been almost non-existent. You couldn't have a heated private room without a way to exhaust the smoke privately. The architectural historian David Crowley has argued that the chimney did more to change the social organization of European domestic life than almost any other single invention. It broke the communal hearth. It allowed a family to withdraw from the hall into private rooms. It is, in a direct and traceable line, the origin of the concept of domestic privacy as we understand it. But even with chimneys and fireplaces, the problem of heat in the pre-industrial world remained brutally asymmetric. The space near the fire was warm. Everything else was not. Medieval and early modern interiors were not heated so much as they contained a heated point. Rooms were large and drafty. Stone walls stored cold and released it slowly. Windows were covered with wooden shutters or oiled cloth. Glass was expensive, and even glass let in cold. You sat near the fire and froze away from it. This asymmetry shaped behavior in ways that now seem almost incomprehensible. People went to bed not to sleep privately, but to share heat. Co-sleeping was the norm across virtually all pre-industrial cultures, not primarily for companionship or childcare, though those were present, but because body heat was a meaningful source of warmth, and warmth was survival. Servants slept in their employers' rooms. Adult children slept in their parents' rooms. Travelers at inns shared beds with strangers as a matter of routine, without social stigma, because the alternative was potentially dangerous cold. The concept of a private bedroom, one person, one bed, behind a closed door, is not an ancient human preference. It is a product of central heating. Specifically, it became possible at scale only after radiators and steam heat made it viable to heat individual rooms cheaply enough that everyone could have one. Before that, the bedroom as we know it barely existed. The first practical steam heating system was installed in a British factory in 1784 by James Watt. But central heating in residential homes remained rare until the mid-19th century, when cast iron radiator systems began to spread through upper-class American and European homes. By the early 20th century, they were reaching the middle class. By mid-century, forced air systems were beginning to make individual room temperature control a mass-market reality. The speed of the transition was remarkable. In 1850, virtually no one in the world had central heating. In 1950, tens of millions of people did. In 2000, it was unremarkable in wealthy countries. In the span of 5 or 6 generations, a technology that had defined the social structure of human life for 400,000 years, communal fire, shared warmth, bodies gathered together for survival, was replaced so completely that most people alive today have never experienced its absence. The consequences were not just thermal. When warmth became individual, when every person could have their own heated space at the turn of a dial, the social obligation to gather disappeared. The hearth had forced proximity. The radiator permitted solitude. The thermostat completed the job, giving everyone individual control over their own microclimate, independent of anyone else in the building. Sleep privatized. Socialization moved from necessity to choice. Children's bedrooms became standard. The live-in servant, who had previously shared space out of necessity, became first unusual and then effectively extinct in most Western households. The communal hall, the shared space organized around the single heat source, gave way to rooms upon rooms, each with its own purpose, each with its own temperature setting. What we gained was privacy, autonomy, comfort, and the ability to be alone without dying from it. What we lost is harder to name because we don't miss it as a thing. We miss it as a feeling. The particular quality of warmth that comes from proximity to other people, which is different from the warmth of a radiator. The enforced intimacy of shared space. The conversations that happen only because there is nowhere else to go. The social architecture that made solitude unusual and togetherness default. We solved the cold, and in doing so, we heated ourselves into a new kind of aloneness that we are still, a few generations in, try to understand. There are, right now, people paying significant amounts of money to sit around open fires together. Fire pits in backyards. Fireplace restaurants. Camping trips organized around the ritual of building a fire and sitting near in the dark. Hygge, the Danish cultural concept of cozy togetherness, organized around warmth and proximity, has become a global lifestyle export. These aren't nostalgia. They're an instinct. Somewhere below the thermostat setting, something in the human animal still knows what warmth was for and what it cost to have it. We just finally got warm enough to forget.